Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korea is currently navigating through a period of significant political instability with a crisis that has cast uncertainty on its domestic governance and consequently its foreign policy, of course. The ongoing impeachment of a sitting president and the shifting political landscape have raised questions about the country's international credibility, its relationships with key neighbors, and its ability to adapt to a rapidly evolving global environment. At the same time, South Korea's foreign policy achievements, such as mending ties with Japan and strengthening trilateral cooperation with the U.S. and Japan, highlight the complexity of balancing regional security, economic interests, and diplomatic strategy. To explore these dynamics and better understand South Korea's position on the world stage, we invite Bruce Bennett, adjunct defense researcher at RAND Corporation in California. Welcome.
Hi.
And also joining us is Choi Hyun-jin, associate professor at the Department of Political Science of Kyunghee University. Great to have you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with Professor Choi. So first, South Korea, like I said, is currently on a leadership vacancy amid the ongoing impeachment crisis against President Yoon Suk-yeol. How would you assess the implications of South Korea's internal political crisis on its foreign policy and diplomatic relations with key neighbors?
Yes, it is. This is a very difficult time for South Korea because we are facing internal political crisis due to emergency martial law and also impeachment of the president and also prime minister. And I'm afraid this is affecting our foreign policy and also relations with the key neighbors. So this instability about South Korea's leadership makes it more difficult to engage in international diplomacy with other countries. And I'm really afraid that countries like China and Japan might see this as a sign that South Korea is less able to lead or negotiate on important regional issues such as security and also trade. And this crisis also makes it more difficult to respond to urgent regional issues such as North Korea's nuclear threat. And the strong and stable leadership is really necessary to work closely with the allies like the United States for denuclearization of North Korea, for example. But the current crisis could delay such efforts. And in addition, the lack of a stable leadership may weaken South Korea's influence in regional and also global partnerships, such as the U.S.-led Indo-Pacific strategy. But however, I believe that South Korea's strong institution and also democratic tradition is providing some hope. So resolving the crisis peacefully and also quickly will help rebuild the trust with other countries and show that South Korea is still a reliable partner. So stability and also strong leadership are key to reducing the negative impact of this domestic crisis on our foreign policy.
Right. And now also to Mr. Bennett, alongside the alliances of key allies like U.S. and Japan, South Korea's international credibility, of course, which had set the country on a course for G7 membership, has now plummeted in the aftermath of impeachment crisis. Given the uncertainty surrounding the nation's political stability, how do you think this might affect its credibility and influence in international negotiations? And also, how can South Korea regain trust on the global stage?
Well, I think you have to start by saying that at current point in time, probably nobody in the international community wants to work directly with South Korea because they don't know who's in charge and who's going to be the president in 3 months or 6 months or whatever time frame it's going to be. And there's such hostility between the two sides. If you work with one side or the other, you're going to burn yourself with the other. So this creates a very difficult situation, just like Professor Choi said. But there's a further complication. If you look at the first impeachment law that was passed, that law criticized President Yoon because he had been too hostile towards North Korea, Russia, and China. I'm sorry, that's not going to sell with the United States. That's probably going to cause real problems with President Trump when he gets to the point of actually trying to deal with South Korea. So he's going to be suspicious of the Democratic Party in terms of their approach. So that really complicates things. I think something needs to be said by the National Assembly leadership to pull back from that kind of perspective, or it's going to be very hard to continue the U.S.-South Korea relationship.
That's very concerning, of course, in South Korea's part. Now, South Korea's top foreign policy achievement under the Yoon administration started with mending relations with Japan, and the Yoon administration had worked to resolve long-standing issues with Japan, particularly on the forced labor compensation issue. Professor Che, then how do you evaluate the effectiveness of these diplomatic efforts in strengthening bilateral relations in the long run?
Yes, I agree. The presidency is one of the most important achievements is the recovery of the relationship with Japan. For example, resolving the first labor compensation issue, and this is a major success for his administration because it has helped to rebuild the trust and open the door for both countries to work together on shared challenges such as North Korea's threat and also China's growing influence in the region. And these efforts with Japan have also strengthened the trilateral security cooperation with the United States. But however, the effectiveness and the future of this relationship with Japan largely depends on domestic politics of South Korea. Many students of foreign policy learn that the domestic politics often they largely shaped foreign policy decision-making process. And for this reason, the outcome of the next presidential election in South Korea will be really important. For example, if a more liberal Democratic Party wins the next election, and I guess it may be harder to maintain the current level of cooperation with Japan, because based on our experience under the Moon Jae-in administration, which was with the Democratic Party. So at the time, we had some serious tension with Japan, and public opinion in South Korea also plays a bigger role, as some people remain critical of the compromises made under President Yoon. And Japan as well, there are some domestic challenges related to historical issue. So both sides, South Korea and Japan, will need to keep building trust and staying in close communication. So in general, the restoring this bilateral relationship with Japan is indeed a significant achievement of the Yoon administration, but keeping this progress will require close attention to domestic politics and diplomacy in both countries.
So, Professor Che, you've mentioned that things could change under the new administration if the Liberal Party takes in office. What kind of challenges specifically could we expect if we see a shift in the administration? So,
if the Liberal Party comes into power in the next election, for example, this could lead to some diplomatic tensions with Japan and possibly undo some of the progress made. For example, some diplomatic agreement between the two countries on the forced labor compensation issue. And also there could be some diplomatic conflict over comfort to women issues as well. But on the other hand, the diplomacy always has two faces. If there is a crisis and challenges, there is also opportunity. Take the example of the previous Moon Jae-in administration. So at the time, we had a diplomatic tension with Japan, and also Japan imposed some economic sanctions, and so that is the restriction of export of key materials to South Korea. So we had some tough times during the Moon Jae-in administration. But however, this created also some opportunities. For example, under Japanese restrictions, we had to strengthen our domestic industry for material, parts, and equipment. And also these restrictions somehow supported the innovation in Korean domestic industry. So this shows that difficult situation can lead to also positive outcome. So, I'm really somehow worrying about the future of a bilateral relationship if Democratic Party wins the election. But I need to mention that there's always possibility that we can change this challenge into opportunity that can benefit South Korean national interests.
Right, Professor, thank you for giving us both sides of the story. Now to Mr. Bennett. In March of last year, President Yoon and then Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida paid visits to each other, restoring in-person high-level diplomacy between the two leaders in 12 years. But recently, Japanese government officials said it will be difficult for Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba Shigeru to visit South Korea for the meantime. How do you foresee Seoul-Tokyo relations going forward?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's probably hard for any national leader to currently visit Seoul. I mean, who do you talk to? How do you talk with each person? There is such hostility between the two camps. It makes for a very difficult and, generally speaking, probably a lose-lose situation. So I think national leaders are going to hold off for now. But that was Prime Minister Ishiba's point, was this is not good timing. He needs to have a clear leader in South Korea to work with rather than creating friction potentially with both sides to some extent. So I think at this stage, we wait, we see what happens in South Korea, how the current crisis is resolved, and then I think we can address the subject. But as Professor Che said, I think it will be much more difficult to continue relationships if the Democratic Party is victorious, because they've been very critical of Japan, and hard to tell what will come of that.
Mm-hmm. And on July 28th, South Korea, U.S., and Japan's defense ministers signed the South Korea, U.S., Japan Security Cooperation Framework in Tokyo, which is the first institutionalized document for trilateral security cooperation. Mr. Bennett, how firm do you expect this alliance to be considering the situation in Korea?
Well, I think that's going to depend upon what comes out of the current crisis. If President Yoon is restored to his presidency, I think you're going to see this build further. If that does not happen and there is a new election and the Democratic Party is elected, as Professor Che said, I think it's going to be much more difficult to work that relationship on a security perspective. We're just going to have to see.
Right, so it really depends on how the situation unfolds in terms of politics in Korea. Now, moving to North Korea and Russia, the two sides have been strengthening their military alliance. And how do you think, South Korea adjust its defense and foreign policy strategies in response to these shifting security dynamics, Mr. Bennett?
I think you face a very difficult situation there. Russia is not only cooperating with North Korea, it's undoubtedly providing a wide variety of military technologies. We know some of them, air defense technologies, which the air forces of South Korea and the U.S. have been absolutely key to the security of South Korea. If Russian air defenses are brought into North Korea, as appears to be the case, that could cause problems. If North Korea is also given nuclear technology, satellite technology, other offensive system technology by Russia, this could be very challenging for the alliance, and in particular could encourage Kim Jong-un to become a bit more aggressive in his provocations, maybe even a lot more aggressive. And that's what the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency has been saying. Recent documents said we need to be concerned that Kim might actually decide to use a nuclear weapon at some point as a demonstration or some such thing. This is a dangerous situation. And we need to be trying to strengthen our security cooperation and our deterrence of North Korea.
All right. And also, let's now shift our discussion to China. Amid continued political instability in South Korea due to the martial law and suspension of president's duties, the country and China have resumed communication, including a phone call between their foreign ministers. Professor Che, how do you see China's approach to South Korea changing, particularly in light of the Trump administration's more aggressive stance on China and the potential realignment of global powers?
I predict that China-South Korea policy is likely to shift as global and regional dynamics change, especially with the upcoming Trump administration, and also I expect also more aggressive stance on China. So South Korea is now facing domestic instability. So China may see this as an opportunity to strengthen its influence over South Korea to counter U.S. pressure. And as you just mentioned, there was a recent phone call between the foreign ministers of China and South Korea on Christmas Eve. And this phone call shows that I think that China wants to appear as a stable and cooperative partner during this uncertain time. The Beijing may try to deepen economic and also diplomatic ties with South Korea, focusing on shared interests such as trade and regional stability. And at the same time, as U.S.-China tensions grow under the next Trump administration, China may try to persuade South Korea to take a more neutral stance on sensitive issues, such as the U.S.-led Indo-Pacific strategy or restriction on advanced technology, such as semiconductors. So despite this, South Korea is likely to carefully balance its relationship. So economic ties with China is important, but its alliance with the United States and also growing partnership with Japan are so important for security and the regional strategy. So I believe that South Korea can use this China's outreach to strengthen economic interests while avoiding actions that can weaken its security partnership with the United States and also Japan.
Then what about Mr. Bennett? Given the strategic rivalry between China and the U.S., how do you think South Korea could balance its economic ties with China and also its security commitments to U.S. and Japan?
I think there's an issue which is growing that may cause some real problems. We know that as part of the martial law activity, military personnel and others went into the National Election Commission to look for evidence of hacking by China. We haven't heard any results of that yet, but if those results come out in the coming days and weeks, there could be a very negative reaction in South Korea to Chinese interference in South Korean democracy. So we don't know that will happen. We don't know what was discovered, but I think that's a risk. We've just had a declaration within the U.S. that China has hacked almost all of the major telephone companies in the United States, going after the phone calls and messages between key leaders in the United States. Trump is not going to respond well to that, and he is undoubtedly going to try to work with U.S. allies to counter this Chinese hacking, which has been going on.
Right, so we'll have to look into that. It's a very critical issue. Now, with the emergence of the Trump administration, South Korea faces a dramatic shift in the global security and economic order. Given the challenges posed by the impeachment crisis and the shifting geopolitical environment, Professor Che, what steps can South Korea, under an acting president, take to stabilize its foreign policy and strengthen its relationships with both East and Western powers?
So now we have, as you said, we have acting leadership, and the acting leadership need to stabilize our foreign policy And also we need to maintain strong ties with both Western and Eastern powers. So I think that there are several important points for the acting leadership. First, the South Korea should strengthen and also maintain its military alliance with the United States by focusing on shared goals, such as responding to North Korea's nuclear threat and also countering the growing influence of China in the region. And it is important also to keep agreements on issues like defense cost sharing and cooperation with Japan on track, although it is not easy under the Trump administration. So in this period of political instability, I believe regular communication with the US officials is really important in maintaining trust and also avoiding misunderstanding between the two countries. And when dealing with China, South Korea needs to balance economic cooperation with maintaining its security commitment to the United States. So while China is a key trade partner, the South Korea should avoid any actions that can weaken its alliance with the United States. And also domestically, South Korean acting leadership must ensure unity and also stability to support its foreign policy. So I'd like to emphasize three keywords: balance, clear communication, and active diplomacy. The South Korea can stabilize its foreign policy by focusing on these three keywords, even during these difficult times.
All right. Professor Che and Mr. Bennett, we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. As we close out the year, we want to thank all of you for your continued support. It has been a year marked by both difficult moments and profound stories, and we're grateful to have shared it with you. We look forward to reconnecting with you in 2025 as we embrace the opportunities of the new year with hope, healing, and brighter days ahead. Until then, goodbye.